Good afternoon, all of you wonderful United Way Vanguard members. And thank you so much for joining us in this third part of our series of Change and Challenge. Today, we're going to be talking about the building blocks of basic needs, the impact of COVID-19 on those basic needs building blocks, and the response that our community has had in regards to those areas. So thanks for joining us. I want to talk about, or often we talk about our cradle to career commitment of United Way. And, we lean on that a lot because we want to know that we're helping people move forward and that donor money is going to good use and helping people move forward in their life and overcoming their challenges. But we also know that without the most basic needs met, whether that's food and shelter and a good mental state, interaction with supportive friends, that, and also, freedom from, drug abuse or drug abuse disorders. Without those basic needs being met and overcome, we can't hope to get someone on a path to success. And so that's why I think the panel today is so important. We're going to talk about how this pandemic has really affected the most basic needs in our community. And we know those needs are greater than ever. So I'm really excited to introduce the rest of the members of our panel. But before I do that, I also want to say, again, thank you to all of you for being there as consistent and committed donors to this community through United Way. It's through that teamwork, it's through living united that we make this community what it is. And thanks for being a partner in that. So speaking of great partners, we're joined today by 4 incredible, amazing leaders in our community. And I'm just going to introduce each one briefly and let them talk a little bit about what their organization does and introduce themselves. So first off, we have Katie Bunder with us, who has spent a long time at Food Finders, and we've worked together years and years ago when I was involved with the Community Investment Committee. And it's just been amazing, I have to say, some of the things that Katie has done and created in that time, going from a couple million pounds of food a year to I think over 12 million, but not just that, really trying to not just give out the food, but to find ways to really plug in and help people not just fill their belly, but to try to really move forward. So Katie, tell us a little bit more about Food Finders and your role there.
Okay, so I've been the director of Food Finders for 12 years now. It's hard to believe. And prior to that, I worked in low-income housing at University.
Katie, I can't hear you. Can anyone hear Katie?
So it looks like some people can hear me, correct?
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I've been at Food Finders for 12 years. When I first came to Food Finders, we were just a warehouse and distribution center. But in 2015, we conducted a capital campaign and moved into Lafayette to Greenbush Street in 2016. And we have an education program and a resource coordination program where we try to find out why people are food insecure and then address those root causes of food insecurity and try to help people begin the long climb out of poverty, in addition to feeding them.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. Next, I want to introduce Brandi Christensen, and she's the Executive Director for Mental Health America. Brandi, I thought it was so cool in your bio, I didn't realize that you, in addition to winning a couple of great community awards lately, have an interesting history as a semi-pro football player. I am totally impressed with that. That's awesome.
I wasn't sure if I should ever include that in a bio, but Linda Rohrman told me I definitely needed
to. It's the best.
So thank you, Jessica, and thank you for having me and Mental Health America on this panel. So I've been with Mental Health America since almost a full year, since October 1st, 2019. So it's been a heck of a year. Nobody talked about that in the interview, what was coming, but I came from Howard County. I was the executive director of Mental Health America of North Central Indiana, so very familiar with Mental Health America. We play a pivotal role in our communities under the guidance of our parent company, the National Mental Health America. Celebrating our 70th anniversary this year, Mental Health America provides a full continuum of care to meet the mental health needs of our community, from prevention programs like suicide prevention, education, mental health first aid, to those basic information and referral programs, to our navigator programs, so we connect individuals to mental health resources in our community and get them connected to insurance and providers. And then we also are getting in the peer support game so that we can assist people who are waiting for those appointments. We also operate a 24/7 crisis intervention line here in Tippecanoe County, and we field calls from the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and Veterans Crisis Centers. So it's great to be a United Way partner agency. I love being connected to other individuals that are working on meeting the basic needs of our community. We know that mental health is interconnected to everything. So if you're not well mentally, if you're not able to get enough food to eat, if don't have access to basic needs, including mental health, it's going to be a barrier to reaching your full potential. So thank you to the Vanguard members for supporting the United Way. When you support the United Way, you support the entire community. Thank you very much.
All right, welcome, Brandi. Glad to have you. Next, we're going to introduce Laurie Ernst, and Laurie comes fairly new to the Senior Center, and well, it's really a trifecta, isn't it? So she oversees the Council on Aging, Meals on Wheels, and the Senior Center. But previously was director at Family Promise, which I was involved on the United Way board a few years back, and I know, this is the power of the community investment process in United Way. We had a situation where the agency that we funded to provide family shelter to homeless families was unable to provide that service sort of in the middle of the year. And Family Promise was able to step in. We were able to transition some funding, and they served that role to help house homeless families. So that was super cool, Laurie. And it just, again, I think is a testament to how well not only does the community work together, but how United Way can help kind of tie things together and be good stewards of Vanguard money. So Laurie, tell us a little bit about your role there at your trifecta leadership of 3 different agencies.
Sure. So I am the executive director at Tippecanoe County Council on Aging. We do operate 3 separate programs here. So it does tend to be very busy at times, but all of our programs are geared toward assisting seniors, our senior population in some way or another. And many of the seniors that we assist are low income or on a fixed income. So the 3 programs that we operate, the first one is Meals on Wheels of Greater Lafayette. We have had that program under our umbrella since 2016. And this is providing a hot, ready-to-eat meal to local seniors and those that are homebound. We do have younger individuals that are disabled and also people that cannot prepare a meal for themselves. So we are able to deliver those meals right to their doorstep Monday through Friday. And it's a hot, ready-to-eat meal. During the pandemic, we saw a significant increase and are still dealing with the increase in need for those meals, and have been able to meet that need through support from United Way and support from our community. So we're very thankful for that. We also operate a senior home assistance repair program. We call that SHARP. And that program, we provide home repairs for senior homeowners that can't afford to get those repairs on their own. It may be a new hot water heater. It may be fixing a leaking roof or completely restoring a roof, providing a new roof. We do a lot of repairs for senior homeowners, and not just repairs, but accessibility accommodations, so ramps and grab bars and things that make it safer for them to stay in their home rather than have to leave their home and go to another facility. And then the third program is our activity center here in the North End Community Building. We have an activity center that seniors can come and be with their peers, enjoy activities, educational programming, and exercise programming. We're just starting to kind of get back to having individuals come. We're at a limited capacity, and we do have, of course, social distancing guidelines in place too. But those are our three programs in a nutshell.
Great, thanks, Laurie. So rounding out our expert panel today, I want to introduce Amy O'Shea, who is actually on staff at United Way and has been involved in helping to spearhead, organize, facilitate, and create a number of awesome programs that maybe don't fall under any one agency. And so United Way has kind of taken those up, or at least helped shepherd those along to make sure this community isn't without. Those include things like Kindergarten Countdown Camp, Read to Succeed, which most people know of. And hopefully today we'll talk a little bit about the Recovery and Resilience Network. So Amy, you want to tell us a little more about your role with that?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So, and thank you for all for being on part of this call and for listening in today. I hope that you learned something or are gained some new knowledge to help understand our work better. So the Resilience and Recovery Network is was a wonderful opportunity that I've been able to be a part of. And in 2018, there was a heroin task force that was creating, and they'd asked United Way to facilitate that network. And as that facilitation took on, we shifted the name to the Opioid Task Force. And the Opioid Task Force met with 4 kind of goals in mind to create more connection around prevention and focus on prevention, treatment, recovery, and law enforcement. And so those groups all had subcommittee chairs. They had people who were interested in being involved and taking action. And quite a few projects came out of those groups. And so things like the Tippecanoe County Youth Summit, where youth are given a chance to speak to the needs that they are seeing in the community, what the community is doing well, and things that are stressing them out. Things like a discussion of a recovery community organization, projects like the quick response team, and some of the peer support work that Brandi spoke about, were all things that were kind of championed by various pieces of the network. And then we most recently kind of shifted to describe our work more accurately by calling ourselves the Tippecanoe Resilience and Recovery Network, understanding that this isn't just about opioids, it's about substance use disorder, and that many times things that play into that are mental health challenges. And so really focusing on all of that as a whole kind of has helped our community come together. We've seen huge collaborations come about because of this. We've seen over 3 years, $6.5 million that have been leveraged to come to our community to work on various aspects of this. And because of all that work that was done, now we've seen a really more integrated response and collaborative response here while the pandemic has been going on. So it's been a real privilege to be a part of that work.
Wonderful. Thanks for that intro, Amy. So speaking of that, I think a good place to start, we had a member write in a question in advance regarding, all these agencies are out here to provide help, but are people knowing where to go, and are they getting the help that they need? Maybe it's a good one to throw out to perhaps Brandi at the crisis line or at MHA. Do you have any sort of tracking on, how folks are connecting to agencies that can help them, or anything you can fill us in on there?
Sure. So our crisis line is a local warm line, but as I spoke to earlier, we do get calls routed through from the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. So we have a local phone number for the crisis line. It's 765-742-0244, and that can be accessed 24 hours a day via text or phone call and chat. That can also be accessed. All of our programs can be accessed on our website. When COVID hit, we immediately took a look at our website to make sure that there weren't any barriers to gaining access. So individuals can schedule an appointment with a navigator to get connected to mental health services on our website. They can immediately chat on our crisis line. There's a chat box on there. Or they can take a free anonymous online screening for 9 different mental health disorders. And we've done our best to try to remove any barriers that exist, and to make everything available in multimedia fashion. So, we're advertising as much as we can, and we're sending people, to Katie and to Laurie and to the United Way, when they're calling for basic needs, and they are calling for basic needs, as well as for suicide assessment and other reasons. So, we've done our best to be as accessible as possible.
That's great, Brandi. And we just had a question come in on the chat box about, you mentioned adding the text service. And I know, with COVID, everything has gone to online. It's almost amazing. If this had happened 5 years ago, I don't know how well we would have weathered it. But I feel like everyone has made the pivot so quickly. It's just been phenomenal. So are you seeing much more of a heavy lean towards text and chat versus the phone? And I know with younger kids, they don't like to call anybody. They want to text it.
Yeah, ironically, we're still receiving more phone calls than texts. And the chats are, we're seeing a lot more phone calls than we are texts and chats. Now, we are working with the Lafayette School Corporation and Tippecanoe and the outlying counties to get our text, capabilities right on their school websites.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to get it everywhere so that people can just tap into it. But yeah, as of now, people are wanting to talk to another human being.
Yes.
For the most parts. It's probably a 10th of our overall incoming communication is via text or chat.
Interesting. We certainly have been more isolated than ever. So I know that in person or in voice, it's hard to beat it.
And Brandi, I can also echo that sentiment of wanting to talk to a real person. We have, at the beginning of the pandemic, a group of community members came together and said, we can foresee that we're going to really need some help in the housing space. And I know last week was Housing Week on the Vanguard panel, but just to kind of follow up on that, we created a housing and stability hotline. And Jessica, your question about are people able to find the resources they need, this hotline is really set up for individuals who are looking for help with rent or mortgage or utility assistance. And things are it's just a changing landscape, day by day, week by week, month by month, of what kind of assistance is available. And so having a person to talk to, like at the MHA crisis line or at the Housing and Stability Hotline, Legal Aid has a hotline. Having a person to talk to, I think, especially now, has been a real benefit for community members.
Great. And so if anybody didn't catch that session last week on housing, it is really good and is available from the Facebook group. Maybe we could start at the top and kind of ping each of you about just the increase in demand for your services since COVID hit. We haven't really touched on that yet, and it would be great to hear and let the community know, what are you seeing and how great is the need?
Yeah. Well, Food Finders had an immediate, we had an immediate increase in the number of people that needed our help, starting about March 13th when the schools announced that they were closing after spring break. Mm-hmm. So suddenly, children needed to be fed during after spring break, the kids that were eating breakfast and lunch at school. And Food Finders was asked to provide those meals, and we're not able to do that because we don't cook food. We don't have a commercial kitchen. We can't package individual meals. So it was great to collaborate with the United Way, and and they took over that providing lunches until the school corporations could get organized to start providing lunches where they would in a take-home manner. So that's the kind of thing that the United Way does for this community. I see them as kind of a continuous needs assessment. So they're keeping their eye on all of our organizations and looking for the gaps and trying to bring us together to fill those gaps. So they've been enormously helpful to Food Finders as we tried to navigate this new landscape. And we went from serving about 400 households a day in our pantry, and we served people by letting them come in and select their own food and put it in a box and walk out the door. Well, there's a lot of contact and a lot of time in our waiting room, so we had to change all of our processes. And in our drive-through pantry, at the peak time, which was in March and April, we were serving between 600 and 700 households per day in a drive-through pantry. And that was also a good example of how the community came together. We worked with the school corporation to set up our drive-through pantry at Linwood School, and they immediately said yes. We needed to access some new equipment, and the United Way was able to put me in touch with a corporate person that could help me get the equipment I needed in a time frame that was unrealistic, and yet we got it. So wow. Yeah, so it really felt good in a strange kind of way because everybody was reaching out to us and saying, "What do you need?" One of the first funding opportunities that we got was through the COVID response fund that the United Way made available, and that just went so fast. And then eventually we got funding from the government, but it was just much slower. So our food distribution, our goal for this year was to reach 10 million pounds, and right now, with months left to go, we're at 12 million pounds. So
wow.
we haven't added staff other than National Guard, which has been great. But we're losing most of the National Guard at the end of this month. So that's why we're moving into a large space where we can have social distancing. And so we're still in the COVID response, I think. And with the unemployment rate high, I don't believe that's going to change for a long time. Even after we have a vaccine, I don't know how quickly the economy will bounce back. And in terms of needing food, the indicator isn't really the health of the community as much as it is the unemployment rate. Mm-hmm. So there's always a connection between the employment rate and food insecurity. And so we just have to really keep working hard until that unemployment rate is very low again. So.
Great. Thanks, Katie. That's pretty phenomenal. I mean, it's just staggering to hear those numbers. And we've seen, the pictures in the paper of other cities, but it's not any different here.
Right.
Brandi, how about, increased patronage there at MHA and at the crisis line? And we also had a question call in that you might be able to tackle in the chat box that, are there any interagency data sharing as far as co-occurrences of food insecurity, mental health issues, and substance abuse? Is there any tracking on that that you would have while you're talking about how the bandwidth is increased?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll get to it. First, I'm going to address the increased needs. So, much like the other agencies, within a couple of days of the shelter-in-place order, we were able to move remotely, which is huge when you're operating with so many wonderful volunteers and staff. with our crisis line. So luckily, we had already had a lot of that framework in place for individuals to be able to work from home. So just to put it in perspective, from March 1st through the end of August 2019, we received 1,636 calls or texts on our crisis line. During the same time period in 2020, we've received 3,820. So, it's I'm not a great mathematician, but it's nearly doubled, and it was really in the beginning. It was incredible to see how staff and volunteers were able to immediately pivot and meet those demands. And I know that we also had a couple of issues with our technology at that time. We were getting assaulted with silent robocalls, which is really disheartening.
wow.
Yeah, when you're a volunteer and you're dealing with some really intense calls, because the numbers alone of incoming calls are pretty staggering. But when you parcel out the data and unpack it a little bit, in that time frame, last year we did 79 suicide assessments, and we've done 350 this year of
Wow.
people that were, that this was their last call potentially. So, for our volunteers to have to be dealing with getting spammed by telemarketers while they're dealing with some really heavy hitting calls was demoralizing. And
Mhm.
when I spoke with Matt Metzger, he's the campaign chair this year, and they immediately provided us some technical assistance, which we still do receive inappropriate calls for the crisis center, but it really assisted us in taking that down quite a bit. So also in that same time period, when you look at our screenings, last year we had 201 individuals that took advantage of a free anonymous online screening during that time period. And this year it's 971. So I've been assured that quintupled is a word because that's what happened. So we know that the need increased, and yet, we pretty much remain the same size staff, but also the United Way assisted us and other community members in just doing a historic call out for volunteers, and that our community met that challenge. And so we were able to really increase the ranks of our volunteers at a pretty poignant time. In terms of data sharing, so we collect data from the crisis line, we collect data from our navigator program, and we collect data from the screenings. We share our data with anybody and everybody. I mean, I take it in my pocket and break it out for presentations all the time because I'm a bit of a data nerd. I think data doesn't lie, and it can tell a story, and it can help us map out the need. In the mental health community, we say that that the first pandemic was the mental health pandemic.
Okay, I can't hear Brandi. Can anybody hear me still?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Jessica?
I can. Brandi, I'm so sorry. Hopefully we can get you back on there. I know you were working to answer Jason's question there from Wabash Center, and hopefully we can circle back to that. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and move on. I will say that is sad to hear that the volunteers were challenged with those robocalls. I know that the volunteers are trained to handle a silent caller as well, so that must have been hard to distinguish whether it was a nervous person afraid to talk or a computer. So I'm glad that United Way was able to help with some technology to work that down. Let's move ahead to Laurie and let us know how things have increased demand there in your organizations.
Thank you very much. The main thing that we saw, well, several things, but the main thing that we saw immediately was an increased need for meals, for the Meals on Wheels. So obviously, people are being told shelter in place. The seniors especially are being told don't go out. And many of them needed additional food resources very quickly. So we were able, thankfully, to meet that need. One kind of internal struggle that happened for us is that our meals are delivered by volunteers every day. We do have a couple of staff people that help, but we have over 200 meals per day that go out, and those go out in routes that our volunteers take and deliver in their own cars. And obviously we couldn't have them do that. They were being told to shelter in place. So we had to enlist our staff right away to deliver all those meals every single day, which was feasible for us to do because we were shut down in other areas of our agency and not able to do the activity center and so forth. But to be able to pay all those staff mileage and costs to drive those meals every day, United Way was a big supporter to help us make sure that we got those meals out. And once we were able to get back to enabling our volunteers again, United Way also helped us gain more volunteers. One thing that happened quite often was that we lost some of our very regular volunteers because they are retirees, and they were worried about also having exposure and getting back out into the community to volunteer. So we had to do a lot of reorganizing, but we were able to meet that need right away. To give you a little perspective on those number of meals, we were typically having between maybe 180 to 200 meals per day. Every day is sort of different. Different people get meals differently. But now we are up to 250 plus meals per day. We have actually hit 300 meals a couple of times. When there's a holiday or something, people double up their meals so that they don't go without food those days. And we've hit 300 a few of those times. So the other thing that happened right away is since we had to close our activity center, I wanted to make a point to reach out to our clients that come and use our center regularly and find out what they needed and sort of reach them where they're at. Suddenly they're being immediately told to shelter in place. Many of them don't have transportation. They ride the bus, and they were pretty quickly shut off from the rest of the world and being able to do the things that they needed to do. And quite fearful to do those things as well because they are in that vulnerable population. So one thing we did was enable our staff to reach out to those individuals and say, what do you need? Do you need us to bring you groceries? Yes, we'll bring you groceries. Do you need PPE? They weren't able to go and run around to all the stores and try to find the masks and try to find the hand sanitizers that were flying off the shelves. So we were able to get kits put together. We distributed over 100 kits of PPE supplies and just basic household supplies, toilet paper.
Like toilet paper.
Yeah, toilet paper, and Kleenexes, and just dish soap and basic things that were flying off the shelves that we didn't want our 90-year-old consumers to be going to the stores and trying to fight people to get those supplies. So we were able to do that, and actually we're still doing that. We're still helping people get groceries. We're still giving out masks and doing things that people need. Because a lot of them, they're still not getting out, especially if they have compromised, health conditions.
Yeah, I remember learning about Meals on Wheels and sometimes, knowing that might be the only interaction some of these folks have in the week and how much they look forward to that delivery, even if it's just to say hello to the volunteer for a few minutes. So I'm glad to see that there's more deliveries because I know seniors are the most isolated, being in a more vulnerable population. So.
Definitely, yeah.
Katie, did you want to jump in on like the overlap in services? Because I know when people are without food, obviously that's the most basic thing. So they've probably got other stuff going on too. Are you guys able to know any about that, the other needs?
Yeah, when someone comes to our food pantry for the first time, we do an intake with them, so we know their household size and they understand the requirements for getting free food from us. And as a part of that, we ask them whether they have housing problems, whether they have health issues, whether they have childcare problems, whether they have, and under health issues, we have a mental health box that they can check, although very few people actually check that at a food pantry. Mm-hmm. But so we do see all the time. I mean, I don't think we have a single person who comes to get food and that's the only thing they need, because everybody needs services from all of us. And I think that's why the directors of these programs in our town know each other, because we're constantly referring people back and forth and overlapping some services. We began providing boxes of food from our drive-through pantry to people who would call us and say they couldn't get here. And so we have volunteers delivering that. We only have about 100 people a week in that program, and it's not something that we want to expand because it's very labor intensive. But we are doing that because we don't want anybody to not have any groceries in their house.
Thanks. And I'm so glad we got Brandi back. We kind of lost you there when you're about to share some of your data. So would you like to pick back up where we lost you?
Yeah, my apologies. I don't know what happened. Yeah, we were talking about data and interagency data. I think that is definitely something that has been on my radar, to work with the other agencies and look at that roadmap. So we're working with Purdue with our data, and totally open to working with other agencies, because I think at the end of the day, I'm hearing about the wonderful work that these ladies are doing with providing, food, the most basic need. But when they're providing that food, they're also providing some socialization, some compassion, some interaction. Mm-hmm. And I know Katie says, that people don't often check those boxes, but I know that when they do, she's going to refer them to us. And I know that when people call our hotline and they need food, we're going to refer them right back to them. So there are ways for us to improve our processes and combine our data. We're gonna contribute to that and be a part of that every single time. But I also did want to point out that that we too did receive a COVID response grant from the United Way, which is going to ensure that we're able to continue our Navigator program into 2021, because I know as Katie and Laurie both said, even as the pandemic, God willing, ebbs off, we're still going to have the residual problems. And we know that everyone is one major situation away from having a mental health challenge. So, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to finish up on that.
This pandemic was a mental challenge for all of us, just the extra isolation, and my intake of red wine definitely went up over the lock-in. So how about circling back to Amy O'Shea, speaking of the increase in substance use, or the increase in stresses, I guess I should say, in isolation, do we know if there's been an increase in folks that struggle with drug or substance use, and how has the collaborations that the community put in place before the pandemic maybe helped you guys respond?
Yeah, so Jessica, I don't have hard and fast data like Brandi does to kind of talk about the numbers of instances of substance use disorder, but we know anecdotally that overdoses are up, that people in isolation are at higher risk for mental health challenges, suicide rates are up, and so they say that the opposite of addiction is connection. And in this time, finding connections has been much more difficult. And so we're glad to have had kind of some of these programs and people looking out for others already in place before the pandemic kind of hit, because if you have a peer that you're connected with, or if you are attending a AA group or with Recovery Cafe, then you have a connection. And most of those places continued on in some way, shape, or form, all throughout the pandemic, and continue to work. And some we're seeing are opening up now again to in-person activities, which is wonderful. But prior to the pandemic, having people coming together to talk about some of these complex community issues, not shying away or backing down from difficult conversations around, in this case, mental health and substance abuse. That it was really important to have built that up before we saw the effects of the pandemic. Talking about the cradle to career continuum and really meeting people along that continuum, but making sure that we can address basic needs is, something that's really, really important to United Way, of course. And we feel like United Way is really built for times like these, tough times when it takes a community to come together to look at all aspects of an issue and come up with solutions that make sense. We know that the substance use and mental health challenges, those are problems that are solved well at a local level, or having solutions come about locally. I don't know that any government entity is going to come up with a across the board answer for that, but having supports here, right where you live and work and play is incredibly important. And so it was really great to be able to have some of those in place before the pandemic started.
Thanks, Amy. And maybe Brandi, with your data there, are you able to tell in terms of contacts if there was an increase or a disproportionate increase maybe in substance use calls or anything else in particular? I know you cited the suicide increase was pretty drastic.
Right. So people are calling in a little bit about substance use. We don't see a ton of that on the crisis line. I do know from other data that we have received that alcohol sales have gone up something like 40% in the last few months. We also know that relapse rates are high and have been high throughout COVID, because as Amy said, the opposite of addiction is connection. It's been really, really tough for the recovery community. Tapping into the online supports, it works for some, doesn't work for others. We find that our younger population and our older population are just not engaging in the same way on via the technology, via the Zoom and the online support groups. So it's incumbent upon us to figure out how to reach them. And that's why we're increasing our peer presence and trying to have that ability for people to either meet in person or over the phone or just however they're comfortable, and meet with a peer. But the recovery community has done a great job of figuring out how to meet people where they're at. And I know that the state of Indiana was really invested in creating a statewide peer program. I'm not sure what the results have been with that, because that's a separate DMHA project from the 3 crisis centers that are operating in Indiana. I do wish that they were able to integrate that into what we're already doing, because I think a more collective approach to the data would be, better. But regionally, I mean, we've seen tremendous collaboration, even interdispersed between the surrounding counties. So I think it's just like Amy said, having that framework in place, having the United Way take the reins in that way having that framework in place and the relationships and the trust for that collaboration has just been, I don't know what we would have done without it. So kudos. And I know Katie has specified that she can speak to some stress with the individuals that she's seen. So, I mean, I'm happy to turn it over to her.
I just wanted to mention that when we had the drive-through pantry, while people were waiting in their cars, we had a really good opportunity to interview those people. So we asked them if they would if they would answer a few questions for us. And what we learned from that is that 30% of the people in that drive-through pantry every day were, and it was amazingly consistent, were new to ever having asked for food help before. And it was people who had manufacturing jobs and then were furloughed or laid off, or often they didn't know how long they would be out of work. It was people with that were in food service, waitresses and waiters who depended on tips, and they didn't know, when their industry would come back. And people that worked in movie theaters and all kinds of businesses. And so those people were seeking help for the very first time, and that is incredibly hard on people. And that's why we wanted it to be as barrier-free as it could be. We didn't want to have anybody go away because it was just too embarrassing or too hard to get food. So we tried to make that as uplifting as possible. But right, so when we had resource coordination, we would often make referrals to other organizations, but we didn't have that opportunity in the drive-through, but we were able to find out what brought them there and had they ever been there before. Suddenly everybody in their family was eating at home, and before several of them had been eating at other places. So it brought on a different kind of stress. And imagine those parents who were suddenly now having to be their child's teacher as well. I think that it's all been just added loads of stress to everyone.
Definitely. So that's interesting that 30% of the drive-through people had never come before, just to show us how many new people are facing hardship and how important it is so much more this year to help support this campaign and all these great organizations, for sure. We did have a question come in advance, and I'm not sure how well we'll be able to address it, but the person asks, are you able to track the frequency and duration of someone who utilizes the services of food finders? And I imagine that goes back to your change in how you kind of collect data lately, but maybe can you speak to that maybe before COVID, or maybe because you're not able to now?
Prior to COVID, we had everybody, when they walk in the door, they have to check in, and they're in our computer. If they're not in our computer, they have to do an intake, and we enter them into the computer. So we could track them every time they came to the food pantry. We knew how often they came, and we had very few that come more often than you would imagine. We do, if somebody was coming 5 days a week, we would have a resource coordinator contact them to ask what else was going on that was causing them to need to come so often. And then we would try to help them address that by referring them to other people. So we haven't been able to do that with the drive-through, but also the drive-through pantries have used a lot of government food. And because it was a disaster declaration, just like what happens in a hurricane, we were prohibited from tracking who got that food. They wanted us to just hand that out to anybody who drove through. Everyone was eligible. So we did count, but we didn't really track for the drive-through pantry. Now that we're going back into our new grocery store facility, we will begin tracking everybody again, and then we'll be able to offer them additional resources if it appears that they're needing an extraordinary amount of food.
Great answer. That's really informative. Thanks, Katie. We only have about 10 minutes left, and I have a few other things I'd love to ask you guys, but I wonder if any of you have something we haven't maybe covered yet that you feel is important to mention. Anybody want to jump in with anything before I take the last 10 minutes? Not necessarily. Okay, so I'm really curious about safe volunteer needs? Because I know a lot of people will be able to donate to the campaign and do monetary donations, but other people really like to, get involved and do something personally to help. But I know there's all these concerns about a safe volunteer activity. So I'm wondering, A, how you guys are juggling the need for volunteers with the actual activities that you need done in this environment. And aside from, I know that you can go to UWLafayette.org and look at the volunteer opportunities there, but do any of you have things you want to highlight now to let people know areas where you could use volunteers, whether it's more drivers to deliver meals or phone volunteers or whatever?
I can go ahead, Laurie.
I'll jump in real quick. We always need volunteer drivers. So we had to revamp our volunteer protocol because of the safety concerns for everybody, not only our volunteers, but of course our consumers, and they're the highest risk population right now. So we have a whole safety protocol that we adhere to. The first thing our volunteers do when they arrive is get their temperature checked by our staff. And of course, we require all the volunteers to wear masks. And then our deliveries are touchless. So the volunteer has the food in their car and they go up to the consumer's home, hang that meal in a bag on the door, knock on the door, step back 6 feet, and then when the consumer comes to the door, they can see that they're okay, doing that brief safety check and that brief interaction. Hello, how are you today? Here's your meal for the day. And that way everybody is still safe, and then hand sanitizing in between consumers. And we do have quite a few consumers that will leave a cooler outside the door. They don't really want any interaction right now because they fear, for their safety from COVID. So we'll just put that in the cooler, shut the cooler, knock on the door, and then go ahead and leave. And that way they know that, their food is still there for them, but they feel a little bit safer that way. But most everybody, we just do that hanging on the door, and that way it's safe for everybody involved. And we always need more volunteers. It takes an hour of your day.
Great, thanks, Laurie.
We need lots of volunteers. We need to replace the 30 National Guardsmen that are leaving us. So we've kept them busy 35 hours a week each. So we need lots and lots of volunteers. We've started trying to recruit volunteers on our website and on our Facebook page, and we've let the United Way know so that they're recruiting volunteers for us. But I don't think we have any danger of getting too many volunteers. And one of the reasons that we moved to this former grocery store site on Greenbush is because we're going to have 6 feet long tables to separate volunteers. So we'll have a volunteer per table, and there'll be 6 feet in between. So we also have masks and hand sanitizer, and we take temperatures when people walk in the door. So I believe that we'll be able to keep them safe. We need volunteers to help do checkout at our new grocery store-like facility, and we have plexiglass up to protect people in addition to the masks and hand sanitizer. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about how to keep people safe, and this is at least 50% so that we can bring the volunteers back, and then 50% so that we can keep our clients safe as well. And we also still need people to sort food. We're even having some shifts where we're just having seniors come in, and you can also create a shift where you can just come in with your friends or your family that you already feel safe around.
Awesome. Sounds like a lot of great opportunities out there to help. Brandi, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to plug volunteers. Okay, we need volunteers too. It's a little bit more intensive, of course, to be a crisis intervention specialist. But the good news is that we can conduct the training to become a crisis intervention specialist completely remotely. We have an online training module. We have scheduled them so there's a morning class and an evening class. The entirety of the training lasts about 2 weeks. And then when you actually do volunteer, we will provide you with the technology to work in the comfort of your own home. And so the entire process can be remote. Nobody has to step inside the building at any time. You can access the building. We do adhere to the CDC guidelines. We do deep clean after every shift, and we still have access to our wellness center with policies and procedures in place for disinfecting. So we're going to keep you safe. It is intense. It's not for everybody, but the need is so great. And we are conducting next um, our next training class is beginning on the 30th. So if individuals are interested, we have to get them in. They have to go click on the Get Involved button on our website and fill out the application. And then there's an interview process just to make sure, that people understand what they're getting into and make sure that they themselves are mentally well enough to meet the challenges of the volunteer opportunity. So thank you for that opportunity.
Great, Brandi. I want to put a plug in for that training because I took it probably 20 years ago, and I think it's one of the most valuable learning experiences that's helped me immensely in professional and personal life that I just value so greatly. So highly encourage it. I've also heard, is it true that the program is so good that we have some interest not just locally, but from out of town people that want to volunteer and go through the training? Is that right?
We do. We actually have volunteers that are volunteering from out of state. Some of them were past volunteers that heeded the call to action when we experienced so much need in the beginning of COVID, and then the word got out kind of serendipitously through my network of national network of veterans. So it's been pretty cool, and we are able to accommodate that. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's phenomenal. Great opportunity to give, and as you all know, when you do give, I think it comes back to you as well. So fabulous. Amy, let's wrap up the list with you there at United Way. Any things you want to speak to about volunteer opportunities?
Yeah, so I've seen a couple of times the United Way website down there, uwlafayette.org/volunteer. If you log into the portal, you will see a variety of volunteer opportunities, much like the 3 you just heard about, but also others. For example, there's a recovery rally, Tippecanoe Celebration of Recovery Rally this weekend. And I know that they were looking for some people to help with kind of making the day flow well. But so hop on now and volunteer today if you'd like. But I know our volunteer engagement committee has also been busy collecting other opportunities that are particularly around virtual volunteerism, to make sure we have opportunities for those who don't feel safe leaving home or want to continue to be in safe environments. So those opportunities are ongoing. We'll continue to update our website with those as well. So feel free to check all those out, and if you have any questions, give us a call.
Wonderful. Well, there you have it. Not to let social distancing or fear of COVID stop you from getting out and helping your community. We've got opportunities across the board to help your neighbors. So hopefully we'll have a good turnout of people willing to roll up their sleeves and get busy. And one last plug for the campaign. Thank you, Vanguard, so much for your consistency and for your commitment and sacrifice in supporting this great community, all these wonderful agencies, and obviously we are very blessed with such talented leadership, teamwork, collaboration. It just speaks to the testament of how wonderful this community is and how phenomenal this United Way is, and all of you wonderful, very much appreciated Vanguard donors. Thank you so much for joining us today for part 3 of this series, where we were talking about the building blocks of basic needs. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. All of you ladies were excellent and so informative. I'm sure available if someone has follow-up questions. Be sure to reach out to them. And tune in for the last and final part 4 next week. of this series. And share and post and let your friends know that couldn't join that the replay will be available. So thank you all. Have a very good afternoon and evening.